From Aotea Great Barrier Island, Aotearoa New Zealand, welcome to Small Island Big Ideas, an ongoing festival of conversations and events created to take Aotea Great Barrier Island and possibly the world forward. I'm Tim Higham.
And I'm Sandy Burgham, and together with our friend Bree Biederman, we are the Small Island Big Ideas team. It's 2024, and Small Island Big Ideas is going global. Thanks to input from many of those in our own community, we've scoured the globe to find other small islands, similar in size to our own, who've had a big idea that has led to some sort of radical reinvention.
We're interested in how other small islands are facing the future. How have they acted on a big idea that's transformed their island community in a positive way? We'll be sharing those conversations and learnings on this podcast over the next few months, one small island at a time. So let's get started.
Fogo Island is an island off an island in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. It has a resident population of almost 2,400 and a land area mass of 240 square kilometres. Historically, Fogo Island's economy was entirely based around fishing cod, but due to the widespread depletion of fish stocks, a few decades ago, Fogo Island faced a social and economic crisis. This is a story of how a government initiative to use the creative arts, specifically film, as an instigator of social change, helped Fogo Island realise its true potential. Today, while fishing remains at the heart of Fogo Island's identity and economy, the creative arts has been the key to the transformation of the island, which has emerged as an international destination for architecture, art, and cultural tourism. Today, we are talking with Susan Cull, Executive Vice President of Shorefast, a charity that was key to the transformation and reinvigoration of Fogo Island. Susan is a ninth-generation Fogo Islander, and while she moved away ostensibly for a university education, like many of Fogo diaspora, she returned with her family a few years ago to serve her community.
Hello.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, good. Good morning. I know it's evening your time.
It is, yes, about 6 p.m. Sorry, I wasn't quite sure how to get into the Zoom room, but Emma helped me out.
You're here now. So nice to meet you. So we've made it easy for you because we both got the same name, so there'll be no confusion. So I'm Sandy Burgham, and
I'm Sandy Callister.
Hey.
So, so it's nice and easy. You don't have to remember, I'll just remember Sandy. So to give some context, as probably Emma told you in the notes, so I'm one of three people who are spearheading this idea called Small Island Big Ideas, where we're talking to people around the world from other small islands. And Sandy Callister is a long-time friend and fellow island resident who around 7 years ago kickstarted her own island residency. So we thought and actually Sandy was the first one who told me certainly about Fogo, and a lot of islanders, about Fogo Island. So we thought it was really appropriate that he came on and had this conversation as well. So
very nice to meet you both.
Yeah, so we know a little bit about Fogo because I'm not sure, Sandy, what was that article in all those years ago?
Well, there were some interviews too.
Yes.
And I think I listened to the interviews with your founder. So I was really, really interested because I was looking for remote places that ran artists in residence.
Okay.
So I kind of think I know what was being said 7 years ago, but not now.
A lot has changed, in 7 years, for sure.
So, Susan, you're the vice president of, is that right? What is the
executive? Yeah, so I'm the executive vice president at Shorefast.
Right.
And Shorefast is a registered Canadian charity. And so we operate a number of social businesses on Fogo Island. One is the Fogo Island Inn, which I'm in today. Yeah. And we use the surpluses from our businesses to fund charitable programs on Fogo Island, like Fogo Island Arts, which is our artist in residency program.
It'd be so interesting, maybe if we could set a context, if you could tell us, and for the people who are listening to this, about Fogo Island, particularly just in brief in terms of we're interested in the transformation, historically what it was, the issue, and the transformation piece and how there was and what's happening now. That's kind of the arc of the story. We'd love you to sum up in 5 minutes. See how you go. See how you go.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
It's actually, I think Fogo Island is a small island that's had a lot of big ideas over its history. Maybe starting in the 1960s is probably the most pivotal moment. My grandmother actually lived to be 101, and she passed away around 2011. And she used to say the first 50 years of her life, nothing changed. Like she felt things were the same when she was a child until she was 50. But the second 50 years of her life, she couldn't keep up with the changes. And I mean, she meant it globally, just with technology, but also what was happening on Fogo Island. So we're a province of Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Fogo Island is an island off an island. So Newfoundland is an island as well. So we already think we're pretty special. And in the 1960s, the provincial government was actually trying to resettle many islands around Newfoundland and many coastal communities and move them inland to like bigger centers. And so Fogo Island was faced with the same kind of question, are you going to resettle? And the province was actually paying individuals to move from their homes to other areas. And it was really because of the collapse of the fishery. So like most island communities we're a fishing people. And when I say fish, I mean codfish. And that was what everyone did on Fogo Island for 400 years. And so in the 60s, when the fishery collapsed, and it was because there were trawlers, factory trawlers coming in and just taking fish out of the ocean at an unsustainable rate, and it impacted people's livelihoods, like the economy of the island. And so this was all around Newfoundland. And what were people going to do? Because there wasn't a lot of fish. And so this was the provincial government's solution was, well, let's move you. Let's move to inland Newfoundland, away from your home. The federal government of Canada had a program at the same time called Challenge for Change. And it was a program that used art to bring about social change. And they looked at different communities across the country. And so in Newfoundland, Fogo Island was selected as the community that they wanted to study. And they partnered with the university, Moral University, and the National Film Board of Canada. And they came to Fogo Island and made 27 beautiful films. They're on the National Film Board's website. You can look at those at any time. And what happened is, like, even though Fogo Island is small, the communities weren't connected. So we actually have 10 separate communities on this island. And, you know, back in the 1960s, they weren't connected by roads. So people didn't really know each other. So when the filmmaker came back and showed these films, everyone realized, hey, we kind of have a shared fate here. Maybe we don't all want to leave our home. Is there something we can get together and do? And so
Susan,
this was 1965, thereabout.
Yep, keep going. Yep. Okay.
And so when, you know, the university was a part of this, and they were a real impetus in saying, okay, how can you take control of your economy? What could you do differently? And so out of this process, which became known as the Fogo process, this process of art bringing about social change is actually studied around the world, was born the Fogo Island Cooperative Society. And it was a shipbuilders cooperative at first, but right now it's still the main employer on Fogo Island, and it's a fish processing company by and large, and they ship fish all over the world. So they have 3 plants on the island, and they fish crab, turbot, halibut, cod, all different species. And so all the work of Shorefast is actually to help support that, because the fishery is still the most important thing for us from a cultural standpoint, and it is the main economic driver around the island.
Can I just could you just back up the bus a bit?
Sure.
Slow down and talk about that link from art to fish, right? Just in terms of, you could just reiterate that, perhaps.
So it really, I mean, it was a community settled on fishing, but the fishery was gone. And what could people do? But that was still what they knew. Right. And so art coming in and in the form of film helped people see things differently and gave them opportunity to kind of reflect on what was important to us in this place, how we could collaborate together. And it was really the impetus for, let's do something that supports the fishery. And it was building ships and fishing boats for other places in the province.
Okay.
So the co-op is, like I said, still running today. It celebrated its 50 years a few years ago. So it's still the most important part of our economy on the island. But the fishery is, not the most trustworthy industry, and it has ups and downs. And in 1992, and I am from Fogo Island. I was born here, raised here. In 1992, the fishery collapsed again. And there was actually a cod moratorium in place, which meant you were not allowed to fish. So this was devastating to Newfoundland. So even in the 60s, there was not a lot of fish, but there was still a fishery. Now there is no fishery. And so for many communities in Newfoundland, people left the entire province. And on Fogo Island in particular, our population went to about half. We were about 5,500 people in the 60s and now down to about 2,500. So it was devastating. And so at around this time, our founder, Zita Cobb, she's a Fogo Islander, and she had, left home like many people do, and had a very successful career in the fiber optics industry. So she was quite successful, retired pretty early, and wanted to do something for her community. So she started a scholarship program initially. This was in the early 2000s, and that ran for 4 or 5 years. And she was on a visit back home, back to Fogo Island, and a parent said to her, "You're just paying people to leave." This really got her thinking, okay, what could I do to make people stay? So she and her brothers kind of looked around the island and used this process, very simple, ABCD, asset-based community development. And it's really asking yourself 5 questions. What do we have? What do we know? What would we miss? What do we love? And what can we do about it? And so art was very important to Fogo Island.
Very important.
Well, it was just, art was important to us from the Fogo process. So that's an asset we have, that's something that we're familiar with. And that was the first initiative of what became Shorefast, was Fogo Island Arts, because much like the co-op was started with art, it was important to Zita that Shorefast also start with art. And so Fogo Island Arts was a first initiative.
The Fogo process, art and expressed through filmmaking.
It was for the Fogo process, but for Shorefast, it's contemporary art, so different mediums.
Okay.
Oh, and I was going to ask, how big is that definition of art? What are you working with?
All different mediums. So the way the program works today, we have 4 artist studios. And when you come in residence with us, you can work in a studio, and you're also given a house to live in, a car to use. And there's not really any parameters around what you must do or that you produce a work. You're sort of given the space to work and produce something, whatever medium you want to work in. And so there's different.
Could it include poetry, writing, or is it?
There are some writers. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely. We have a very broad definition of art, but that it is contemporary art.
We've got so many questions. I just want to shoot get very clear in my mind, right? The ABCD, the asset-based community development, right? In terms of the art as an asset, right? Get that the Fogo process initially kickstarted it because it used the creative expression of film. But when you say art was an asset, or is it because there was it just Zita, or did Fogo Islanders love handicrafts and art expressions, or what can you just?
So well, when you look around at assets that you have in a community, making, we have a culture of making, and those are skills we have. So whether that's furniture or quilts, and design, there are a whole different realm of making skills that this community has. Yeah. The environment we live in, like it's the geography, like the place that we are, is very unique and specific. So that's an asset. That's something we have. And then hospitality. So Newfoundlanders are known for their innate hospitality. So when you kind of look at all of these things, it lent itself to tourism and hospitality and geotourism specifically. And that's where the Fogo Island Inn was born.
Tell us more.
Well, there had to be something else to support the fishery, because it looked to this community. If the fishery was the only real economic driver, that wasn't enough to grow the population and make this a sustainable economy. So what else could be done? So when we look at all these assets, it led to tourism as an adding another leg to the economy. And, we could build a 200-room inn and charge $250 a night. But this is an island, and there's a ferry. And as one community member said, we can only love so many people at a time. So
it's a good point.
it's good.
Really good.
And tourism is about scale. That is really important. And what I think a lot of people get wrong is not realizing the place in which tourism is happening. And it has to consider the community and the place first. And so when you consider all of these things, it led down the path of luxury tourism, where it's high value and it's a high value product that people are receiving. So there's less people coming, but there's more money coming into the economy, and it's sustainable for the infrastructure that's here.
Can I just ask a little backup question? You started with the artists in residence first,
Yep.
and you built those amazing architectural places. I think that's when I first read about you. Was there a real intention around that was going to give you your kind of, was it going to attract a certain kind of tourist? Did you feel that that was your waving the flag first?
Absolutely, that was a part of it. And so we wanted to start with art, but it needed to be something that was going to grab people's attention. And when you're with the intent of tourism, it needs to be something that was going to be seen worldwide too. We don't do things on a small scale. We do it to get attention and to really make an impact for the community. And art, there's so many artists here now. What Shorevast is doing is just one element of art, but it was to really get the attention here first.
So we can get our heads around it. Before you were possibly planning the Fogo Island Inn, the luxury accommodation hosting facility, but the initially you had, was it 4 custom built art residency places? Is that right?
Studios. Yep. Yeah. So there was always the idea for the inn, but rather than start with the inn, we wanted to start with art.
And so tell us what you did. So what did you actually do? Did you approach architects?
So we have one architect who built the 4 studios as well as the inn. His name's Todd Saunders, and he is a Newfoundlander, had a connection to Fogo Island, but now lives in Norway. And he was the only architect really ever considered, because the way he works resonated with what we wanted to do. And that was really important. And I think a lot of the things that we do at Shorevast, it's important to not just hire somebody who you think can do the job. You have to be somebody who deeply understands the place and what you're trying to achieve. And that's really important in hiring somebody who fits well, that you can work with, who understands where you want to go with the project.
And that really helped too, because those buildings have attracted a lot of attention. Whose land did they build on, and how did you actually fund that initial building of the artist's residence?
So the land where the studios are built are what's called Crown land. So in Newfoundland, the Crown or the province owns quite a bit of the land you apply to build. And so we had to make an application and say what we were trying to do. And that's sort of how we purchased the land. Initially, for the studios in the inn itself, it was largely philanthropic donations. A large contribution was from our founder. But for the building of the inn as well, both the provincial governments and the federal governments contributed as well.
And so they were built. Was there sort of global publicity to attract in artists of global repute or emerging artists, but people from around the world, right?
Yeah.
Artists from around the world, yep.
Yeah, so with our artist residency program, there's different funding. So we partner with other art organizations. We do an open call every couple of years. So there's different components to the artist in residency program. So right now they're funded through different means, but initially it was the private donation.
Okay, and so do you have, when you're looking for artists, because your island is unique, do you have a particular set of criteria what do they have to demonstrate to you to want artists?
The different programs have different criteria. So there are judges and people have to make applications. So it's not, we don't often make the decisions internally. So it does, again, because they're partnerships with other funding organizations or other donors, there's a different set of criteria for each sort of residency. We do ask, though, that every artist that comes contribute back to the community in some way, so that they do some sort of community project. And that's very open. It could be an artist talk, public showing of their art, could be a workshop with the local school. So there's many different forms it can take, and we talk to each artist individually about that.
That's the same as your one. I mean, that your
exactly. I think I've always believed that coming to the island is restorative. So it's not like everyone should be doing this whole body of work that they can then,
Right.
Do you have liaison people that Fogo Islanders that work with each artist just to stitch them back into the community? How do you do that?
Well, we do have a team that work with all of our programs that happen on the island. So whether through art or our environmental initiatives or our culture and heritage programs. So we have a coordinator who works with each artist. But we don't require that they do anything specifically for the community. But we do find that when artists come here, they often change. Their thinking about their project or what they're going to work on changes quite dramatically because they're so influenced by the place.
Yes.
And, just back to some functionality around that. You said you give them a car. What else do you do?
So when they come into residence, they get a vehicle. We help arrange their flights and their transportation to get here because we are far away from far away. So we help everyone navigate that. They get a vehicle. They have a house to stay in. So all of our artist houses are sort of restored heritage homes. So they're typical Newfoundland salt box house. So that's a very specific type of vernacular architecture here in Newfoundland. And so the 4 artist houses are restored, and you can stay in the house, and you get a studio to work in as part of your residence.
And do they get a stipend while they're there?
Yeah, to help with living expenses.
And some of your artists come from Japan, all around. Do you pay for their flights from Japan or?
Yep. Yeah. So we have a travel policy, and so there are some parameters, but generally, yes, travel is covered.
You must have a very good fun to do all of that.
Well, yeah, but again, so there are different partnerships for different parts of the program, but yes, but always looking for more donations, that's for sure.
What a creative outreach program for Fogo Island. I mean, it is literally a creative because it's through art, but it's such an interesting, wholehearted way of community and international community as well. And so talk to us about, then we've got so that started a couple of years before the Fogo Island Inn. So tell us a bit more about the Fogo Island Inn. So yeah.
I wasn't living on Fogo Island at the time, but as a Fogo Islander, of course, you're very aware of what's happening in your place. There's actually a saying about Newfoundlanders in general, and maybe this applies to all islands, but they say you always know the Newfoundlander in heaven because they're the ones that want to go home. So home is very everyone's so attached to their place.
Yes.
And so, of course, even though I wasn't living here, I was very aware of what was happening. And I think, like any small place, change is hard. And so when something that's so big as the Fogo Island Inn, because it's quite a big building, is being built on this rock that many of us had walked around and walked over for years. It's a big change. And for me, living away, I couldn't understand how this was actually going to work. And I think a lot of people had a lot of doubts. When you grow up somewhere in a small place and it looks like there's not much to do there, you kind of wonder, how can this big idea actually work here? And I think for people living on the island, there was doubts as well. But what the organization did really well was talk to people and go to their houses. And, Zita would go and have tea with people and talk about what was happening. And, living away, I think the people who weren't there were the people who were most suspicious of the idea, or what is this going to be? Because you want home to be the same as what it was when you left it. Right. But now, having moved back home, I've been here 10 years now. Definitely the people that live here, we see the benefit every day of what the inn does and what has happened. I mean, the spin-off effect from having this sort of business here and what it's created. We have so many small businesses here now. Our economy is diversified. It's unbelievable. Like, I certainly couldn't have imagined this growing up here. So living here, you get to see how much this means for the community.
So what kind of tourist have you attracted? Is there a range of types? Has it changed over time? What are they coming for?
Well, it depends. So I think there is a range. So certainly there are certain guests who come to the Fogo Island Inn, but what's also happened is because you have this building and the artist studios and all the things that are happening here, tourism is a huge part of our economy now. So there are many other places to stay on Fogo Island. But everyone doesn't have to stay at the Fogo Island Inn. They're mostly houses that are like vacation rentals.
Yes.
But it's a very popular place for tourists, absolutely.
So the Fogo Island Inn, and so I just want to think about this. So Zita Cobb, who was the founder of Shorefast, yep. She clearly, from the community, and this has been a recurring theme through the interviews that we've done so far on this project, from the community, had a strong vision, but really got up close and personal with people who were feeling nervous about it. Okay, literally sitting down to have a cup of tea, because I'm imagining on this island, if somebody said, I've got a great idea, let's put a really state-of-the-art, architecturally designed, large facility so we can have more high-end tourists. I can imagine the pushback on that, and on a location that we all know and love in nature. So I'm sure it was exactly the same. So it would be great to hear about, I mean, she obviously had a vision and she had a feel for what it would do for the island. But what have the you talk about spin-off businesses. Tell us about the positive impacts in detail. Unpack it.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable, actually, the difference in the community. So when I grew up here, your only employment prospects would have been to work in the fishery, maybe a nurse or teacher. Like that was really it. Now, I think at last count, we had about 65 different bricks and mortar businesses. And there's, massage and pharmacies and hardware stores and convenience stores and artist studios and craft shops and, on and on and on. Like, so there's so much more, the social side of things, I guess, and what's available is totally different. There also would have been really nowhere to stay except a very small motel. Now there's, if you go on a vacation rental site, you'd probably see 65 different places to stay.
So spin-off accommodation, because how many rooms or how many beds in the Fogo Island Inn?
In Fogo Island, there are 29 rooms.
Okay, so
very small. Yep, 29 rooms.
Keep going. Yep, keep going. Tell us about the spin-off accommodations and impacts.
So the other things that with our own businesses for Shorefast, I'm here in one of the rooms now, and everything in the inn is made locally. So our furniture, the quilts that are on the bed, and that's sort of our policy, is to buy things as close to home as possible. And if barring that, it's from organizations and businesses that have proper environmental and employment standards.
Yeah.
And so when we were constructing the inn, it didn't make sense to put in, chandeliers from Italy. Like, this is Fogo Island. Like, that wouldn't have been right for this place. And so we worked with local makers and then global designers who came to the island, looked at the skill sets that are here, the materials that are here, and the traditional designs, and started to develop furniture that's more contemporary, but yet is very much of this place. And so we built the furniture, made the quilts and all of the fabrics, and then we realized people wanted to buy the furniture. So now we have a furniture business, and we sell textiles and furniture. So we have the Fogo Island workshops.
So has that led to a generational shift? Because, with old traditional skills like quilt making, a lot of older people do it and younger people don't know those skills. So has that process also encouraged young people on the island to learn to quilt? Or
there's definitely much more interest now. I would say it's still, we're only 10 years old, really, in terms of the inn. So we're still learning our own selves. How do you, take these skill sets and now get more people interested in doing it? So there's definitely an interest, but now we need to actually build this into a different way of working. Because if you look at 50 years ago when people were making quilts, most times the women were not working. They were at home and that's what they did.
Yeah.
That's not the way the economy is now. So it's looking at how can we still have those skill sets? How can people have time to do those sorts of things with the way they're working? So this is just some of the problems that we're looking at right now.
And I loved in the notes, Growler's ice cream. I love that. So there are little businesses that have actually become community favorites that have just emerged out of this movement.
Yeah, I mean, Growlers is probably the most beloved Fogo Island.
Why Emma pointed out, talk about Growler's ice cream. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So all of the food we serve at the inn, and we also have another business we opened last year, a restaurant, Storehouse. We, again, similar to our purchasing policy, try to serve food that is local.
Yeah.
And so with Growlers, it started with berries. So there are 20, I think, different kinds of berries that grow on Fogo Island.
Oh.
And not everyone is going to go and pick the berries and just eat them. What else can you do with them? Because there are so many health benefits to berries. So it started making ice cream with berries. So we have partridge berries and blueberries, but we have a whole host of flavors, certainly.
Oh, that's kind of, I just had to ask that question because it was in the notes anyway. So meanwhile, what's happening with the fish? Because it's also, so we get that this movement, and fantastic, but tell us about what's happened with fish and fishing.
So fishing has evolved, of course. So now the most lucrative fish, if I say fish, is crab. So most fishers on Fogo Island now actually fish crab.
Yeah.
But many different species. So for us, cod is still very important, and the cod stocks are starting to come back. So actually the moratorium was lifted earlier this year. So that's very reassuring. And we partner with the co-op, so the Fogo Island Cooperative Society, which processes fish. Shorefest partners with them in many different ways. We have a seaweed initiative that we're partnered with them on as well. And then we have a little fish business called Fogo Island Fish. And this is really a marketing business for us, but it's a partnership with the co-op. And what it is, it's a handline cod business. And so most fishers traditionally have been fishing with nets, which are not probably the most sustainable fishing method. So we've been working with fishers who handline, which is one fish at a time. And you get a much more plumper cod. There's little bycatch, so it's more environmentally friendly. And we pay fishers a premium who fish in this method. And then we sell this fish then to markets, in bigger cities across Canada. And
you mentioned a seaweed business. That's interesting. That's come up in some of the comments.
It's not a business right yet, but part of what Shorefest does, we're innovators and we love testing and trying new things. And seaweed has been something that, we've started to think, okay, how can we have a lot of it here? What could we do with it? And can it grow here and yield more seaweed as a product to do something with? And so we've partnered with a couple of different organizations, including the university here in Newfoundland and the Cooperative Society, and working with fishers to see if we can plant seaweed and start to grow seaweed. So we're still in a pilot development phase, but it looks like, yes, we can actually grow seaweed. So now the next phase of this will be, okay, well, what can we do with it? Are we going to process it? What products could it be used for? And part of with that is to help expand the fishing season as well, because seaweed actually would be harvested at a time when fishers aren't fishing another species. So it would work to extend the season for fishers as well as plant workers.
Right. So you've obviously got very comfortable with working with quite long exploratory times too on some of these initiatives.
Yes, if you heard Zita speak, she'll always say we work on a 100-year horizon. So that's part of the challenge, I think, in community economic development work as well. Many people in a community kind of are what's happening today and worried about today. But for a lot of our work, it is about a resilient future. So we're often working 100 years out, trying something today, but where will that be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah, Sandy is a trustee on something called the Aotearoa Trust, which is about, well, how would you describe the Aotearoa Trust, Sandy?
We're just rethinking our mission, but it is around making the island peoples more resilient and stronger. And we've done energy and we've done community gardens. We do the water drop, things like that. But we're just having another rethink. And we've come back to, Sandy and I were talking earlier, it's actually pulling people together. We're not as connected, and there's a lot of repetition in what we do. So we're having a thinking year as to how we focus going forward and what skill sets we want. When things are successful in our trust, they get then passed off to other organisations to run. We did the recycling, and that's now become a very big business, and we don't do it. So we're kind of like a startup NGO.
I thought that's why I thought, Sandy, you'd be interested, if you can, Susan, just it seems like Shorefast has been so fundamental to the transformation as a charity. So I'd love to hear more about that, and also how it bumps up with or collaborates with if there is like a district council, the federal government have to put in place or whatever, and how all that works.
And I would like to add into what Sandy's just asked. How do you find trustees? Because one of the things we find on our island, the potential pool of trustees on the island with the skill sets we need, we don't have them.
Okay, so
and that's the dilemma we're going through right now.
So there's quite So
yeah.
all of that, please.
Okay. Maybe I'll start with what Sandy you were just mentioning about the skill sets.
Sure.
So one sort of guiding principle for us, which I think is from a New Zealand poet, has been the art of walking upright, which is the art of walking upright is the art of using both feet. One is for holding on and one is for reaching out. And for our work, we know, and this has been a hard thing in community economic development, and I can say this because I'm from this place. It's hard to ask for help and bring in people from outside. And I think that's one of the challenges and the tension that is often in small places. And with Shorefest, we never believe we can just do it ourselves. It's always about reaching out. And I think that's been one of the unique things about this organization. It's probably one of the harder things to really work within the community on, because we don't believe we can do everything ourselves, and we don't believe we have everything in this small place. So again, if we look at the inn or our furniture or with art, it's bringing people from outside in, because you see a whole new perspective when somebody has fresh eyes and what they learn, and then what you also learn from them. Like, we believe in this exchange. And so it's really important that you have people from here and from away. And so even within our organization, we have a team that works off Fogo Island. Yeah. Most of our team are here, of course. I mean, this is our home and our headquarters, but we don't have everything here. We're a small place, 2,200 people. So that's really important for us, that everyone understands. It requires all of us to do this.
And who's helped you identify the people you might want on your trusts or helping you? Is it you, because you've mentioned partnerships with universities, with the provincial government?
It depends. I mean, we're a bit of a startup too, and we're always looking for that new idea. And I often, when I'm working with anybody in our team or somebody new joins the organization, they can get overwhelmed by all of the things, all of our aspirations and dreams, because we have big dreams. And what I liken it to is that, we probably have all these balls in the air. There's 100 ideas that we have. You never know the moment when you're going to meet somebody and, you know what, that idea, we're going to connect it. And seaweed is a really good example of that. I joined the organization over 7 years ago, and I think the first week I started, there was conversations about seaweed, and is this a project we could take on? But we actually didn't start it until 2 years ago, because the Fogo Island Co-op came to us and they said, hey, yeah, maybe we're kind of interested in seaweed too. And to us, if the co-op, a deep community organization, the most important community organization, and Shorefast both want to do something, this is probably a home run. So for us, it's kind of you're always watching and observing and learning whatever you can, because you never know when two things will come together that this is the next project. So it's hard to plan. When you're in a community, you have to respond to the needs of the community and what's kind of happening, and that changes from day to day.
I love what you're saying, because we do have those discussions about seaweed and fishing quota, and they go on for quite a few years. And sometimes you think, oh no, let's just give that. It hasn't happened. Let's not do it. But you're saying just keep them floating till the right things connect up.
Yeah. Planets will align.
Yes.
So tell us.
Yeah, we play the long game, like because you just never know. I think that's a hard thing for a lot of people to really understand. But you have to be here. If you're here for community resilience, you're in it for the long haul.
So I'd love to get my head around Shorefast, and how that is different from, say, a local government, a council, or whatever that might be, and how those two entities might work together.
So we have a town council here, and sort of new. We had, like I said earlier, we had 10 communities on Fogo Island. So 10 very different communities. And there were 5
geographically, and is that the main difference between those communities? Would it be geographic?
No, well, so the island's about 250 kilometers square, and the communities are settled all around the coast, and they settle primarily in religious differences. So our community is English and Irish ancestry, like that's where everyone who lives here can probably trace their ancestry back 400 years. And so really settled along religious differences, to be honest. Like that's how the communities were settled. Geographically different. What people fished was different, because both sides of the island look very different. One has trees, one has rocks. And roads didn't connect the communities really until maybe the 70s, to be honest. So even when I went to school here, like I grew up in the 80s, early 90s, people stayed in their communities, very much like stayed together and didn't mix a lot.
Yeah.
So there were 5 separate councils on the island, and they didn't amalgamate until 2011. So that's fairly new.
Right.
So right now, we like to say we're 10 cultural communities, but 1 economic community.
Okay. And so Shorefast serves all those communities that are coming together?
Well, yeah, so we're a community economic development organization. So the municipality sets the rules, and they have bylaws and all the ththings to do with garbage collection and snow clearing, all the services. And that's certainly what a town council takes care of. For us, it's more about how can we help support what's happening here on the island, and how can we be a bit of a lightning rod to kick things off around economic development.
Right.
In your world, it doesn't sound like you're dependent at all from funding from that local board.
No. So that's a town. Yeah. So the town councils mostly in Canada, I wouldn't say typically fund community organizations, maybe very small amounts, like for local festivals, that sort of thing, but certainly not at the scale that an organization like Shorefast would need.
Right. And Shorefast, how many people in Shorefast approximately?
It depends. It's a mix of full-time, part-time, seasonal, but around 250 people.
That's really interesting.
And how many on your board
So we have a bit of a unique structure. So in Canada, charities can't operate businesses. So they can own them, but they can't operate them. So we are a charity, and we have a charity board. I think we have 9 board members right now. And we also have a business board of 5, 6 that oversee our social businesses.
Right. Sure. That's just
and they're governance boards, like they're not as involved in operations. So we have, Zita's still our CEO, and we have a senior team that manage both entities.
Let's talk about a little bit more about the impact on the community. So obviously this has been quite a rapid transformation, so economically and socially. So talk to us, initially you talked about the skepticism with change, right? And particularly with I've got a great idea. How about a big inn, right? That's going to attract wealthy outsiders, So Okay, so here we are in 2024. So just tell us about the impact, any skepticism, impact on people's lives and people, I guess, people's hearts, really, hearts and minds.
Yeah. I have seen in the 10 years since I've moved back to Fogo Island an enormous difference in mindsets. And I think because it's proven, the inn has been open. We celebrated 10 years last year, and people who live here now see what this has done for the community. I look at kids in the school. So I have 3 kids, and I moved back to the island. And our population numbers, like school enrollment numbers, were quite small. And those numbers are getting bigger. So that means more young families are moving, which is positive. There's more activities for kids. Like my kids have very busy, fulfilling lives living here, which again, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that. I couldn't have imagined moving back to Fogo Island, especially to raise kids here, because I would have thought, well, what is the future? What could they do? But now we have architects here, and we have chefs, and like you have accountants and things that I just would not have dreamed possible. And so I think for me personally, and even when I talk to people here, I think the impact that ShoreFast has had is that hope and that anything you can dream is possible. Because if you were to grow up in a small place, and we joke, there's a joke in Newfoundland, it's called the Rock, because it is just this rock in the middle of the ocean. And to know that you have this beautiful building that's so well designed, and that people from all over the world want to come here, and that somebody from New Zealand will call and want to learn about your community, it just fills you with a sense of pride. And you kind of know we can do anything.
Yeah.
And have you been the beneficiary of now, I've just been in Europe, and so many digital natives living in old historic cities. Have you seen Canadians or non-Canadians come that can now live on your island with a different skill set as well?
Oh, absolutely. So many people who have moved to the island are not from Fogo Island, or not from Newfoundland. Like, so many people have moved here that bring a different perspective and have changed the fabric of the community in very positive ways. We've had one couple that have moved here. They have a gallery, an art gallery that they've opened. Like, that's amazing. I wouldn't have thought that that's something that our community would have. Textile makers that make different textiles, pottery, like so many different things that we just would not have had here. So it's amazing.
I hate to be boring, but what is the impact on house prices?
I mean, is it positive or negative? It depends how you look at it, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. When you look at economies, you've got to look at properties.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, prices have gone up quite a bit since ShoreFast started, of course, because it's become a place that people want to live.
Right.
There are a lot of houses here, but again, this attachment to family means they're family homes, and not a lot of people want to sell them because they come back for a couple of weeks in the summertime. So prices have gone up quite a bit, rental prices as well. So that's a consideration that we have to think about when people are coming here to work. It's a story that's different than most about Port Newfoundland, because it is not as I don't want to say it's expensive to live here, as I certainly don't feel that. I left the city and moved here, and I certainly found it was a much more affordable place to live. But it can be it can be a surprise for people who think, oh, I'm moving to this little small place, and
I'm going back home. I'm going back home to live a simple life. Okay, that's a good reason to change.
And with the rental properties, you said not everyone has to stay in the hotel. Do people use Airbnb, or have you tried to steer clear of all of that and do it differently?
There are Airbnb properties on the islands, certainly. There are some new legislation that's come out from the province that I think will really help that a little bit, around insurance, and just because a lot of people were just putting houses on Airbnb without any consideration for the impact to the community. So what would happen is that all of these properties are going on Airbnb for rent, and there's nowhere for people to live to live, essentially. Like it was a big pull away from the rental market. So I think now that's starting to flatten out a little bit, and house prices and rental prices are starting to flatten out a bit as well. Like it had gone a bit high just after COVID, but it does seem to be flattening out a little bit now.
Talking with Emma, our wonderful researcher, she was, and I wanted to probe this, so she gave us some notes and some questions to think about. But tell us about this new initiative, or more recent initiative, about network-based economy. Or tell us about that. That's interesting.
So, I mean, Shorefest is always about Fogo Island and always will be. I mean, this is our home and where we started. But even since I came on board about 7 years ago, I would say every week someone reaches out to say, can you tell me about how you started, what you're doing? I want to make a change in my community. What resource do you have that you can lend me, because we want to do this thing? And I mean, you want to be able to help everybody, but it's hard, and we're sort of doers ourselves, so we're not great at putting together toolkits and resources, or we haven't been. And really during COVID is when we spent a lot of time thinking about this. We were closed for about 18 months because you couldn't travel to Newfoundland. And it gave us some time to think about, okay, what is sort of the evolution of Shorefest? Like, is it always just about Fogo Island, or what is our impact? Can it be more than just about Fogo Island? And we did a pilot project. We partnered with 4 other communities in Canada, and quite large places. They were cities. I think the next in population size to us was a place called Prince Edward County with about 26,000 people. But some of the other places had 100,000 plus.
Right.
And we got together, it was virtual. And we started to explore, okay, what are the similarities between these 5 places? And are there things we can learn from each other? Mm. And I was a skeptic that we would find any similarities between this little tiny island and a big city like Hamilton, Canada. But I was wrong. There are so many similarities to all places everywhere. We all have housing challenges. We all have unemployment challenges, and people care about their place and they want to do something for their community. And maybe community in a big city means a neighborhood. It doesn't have to mean the whole city, but we can boil it down to a more manageable size. And so we did the pilot project, and this is all on our website as well, like all of our learnings. And we decided, okay, maybe there are things that we can do to help others. And so now we're launching this new initiative called the Shorefest Network for Place-Based Economies. And it's to develop some sort of program where we're working with other communities and their economy and what's unique about their place and what they can do in their home. Because everything we do is about place. Like, we don't feel that there's a model. You can take the Fogo Island model and we can bring this to, Toronto. It's not necessarily going to work somewhere else, but the concepts that we've used around asset-based community development, and we have another model called the place model. Those concepts can work anywhere, but you have to look at what's unique about your community and your place.
That, I'm sure, Sandy, you'll be all over that. Just so interesting.
Well, it kind of works because with our Indigenous peoples in New Zealand, their worlds are place-based, and we have Indigenous people on our island. So we have that coming, that discussion about my mountain, my river, yes.
Yes, and also just geographically, if you live here, you are centered in place, whoever you are. I mean, I was interested also because certainly from a New Zealand point of view, and certainly within this island as well, as a microcosm of New Zealand, we have, a strong First Nations Indigenous community of Māori. And I was wondering if on your island, if there has been an Indigenous community that have in some ways impacted and influenced identity.
So not on our island of Fogo Island. There is evidence that it had been Indigenous presence here hundreds of years ago, but it doesn't appear that anybody lived here year round. Certainly that maybe they had spent some summers here. And I mean, for different reasons, we are pretty far out in the North Atlantic, so it is a pretty harsh environment to live in. But through our work with the pilot program that we did, we have been worked with other Indigenous communities, and I certainly personally have spent time in Indigenous communities. And yes, there are absolutely similarities to this notion of place.
Yeah.
And so that is, we can all learn from each other and take some of those learnings, and how can we apply those principles to all of our work in a community.
Well, Sandy,
going back to place, to fly to our island, you fly in small planes, and that takes about 30 something minutes. And then if you go on the ferry, it takes 5.5 hours. But what's your proximity time-wise to what you call your mainland?
Yeah, so we call the Newfoundland Island our mainland, and you would fly to a place called Gander, which is an hour drive and then about an hour ferry ride to Fogo Island.
So you fly into an hour's drive. Wow.
And then an hour ferry ride. Now, there is a small airstrip on our island, but it's only for private service or like air ambulance.
So most of your tourists actually do come by ferry?
For Fogo Island Inn, we do have like a number of our guests do fly privately, but most do come by the ferry. Yeah, so they would fly into Gander, either commercial shuttle service, or they may drive themselves, rental car.
So you need to commit it. I'm so love to come. We're almost out of time. Sandy, do you have any further questions?
Have some residents come back to live on the island, or come back to visit quite, do you
connected visits. Oh, sorry. I might have talked over then.
Do you have long-term relationships with the?
This is definitely.
Does that carry on in any way?
Absolutely. So for anyone that has been in residence with us with our program, some have come back, absolutely. And usually one artist per year comes back the following year and has a show in our gallery, or we've done publications with them for some of the shows that they've done. And, we like to say once you've met people, you're tangled up with them forever. And, you're just connected in a way once you've spent time together, but especially when you've spent time in this place. So it certainly is, yes, a long-time relationship.
Well, Susan, we're out of time. Let me just thank you so much. I have found this inspiring, fascinating, and you've just sparked so many thoughts for me. And I guess also there's so much more to learn, not just about Fogo Island, but just also the way you're doing things. I think there is so much to learn here. So we're going to be sending you from our island to your island a gift. But I can use the excuse that it's going to take a while to get to you. So actually, what it is, it's something that's made, it's handcrafted on the island. I don't know if anybody in the inn would be, but it's we may send a T-shirt because we know that's going to be easier to send. But we're off the grid, okay? So basically, we're not attached to mainland power. We make our own power, collect rainwater. Oh, wow. This is one of our favoured. This is Island Gin, and they're our sponsor of this whole podcast, right? And so this is made on the island off grid. As I said, and we're going to try and get this to you somehow. But what we know is that because it's called Island Gin, we kind of figure that all our lovely island networks around the globe may enjoy it. But what we do know, it's going to be a hassle getting it to you. So it'll arrive in some months ahead. We know our islanders is going to Canada because we're going to say, can you post this, please? But we'll send a T-shirt. That's easier. But one day, this will arrive on your desk.
I won't check the post office every day.
Just don't hold your breath. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great. Sandy, anything to say?
No, it was really inspiring.
Really inspiring. Wow.
You're the first Fogo Island person I've ever talked to.
Well, I won't be the last, I'm sure.
It's just been
thank you so much for asking me. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'll see you.
Enjoy the rest.
what did you pick up? What resonated in that?
That they have never been contained, probably because of their history, by the local board. That it's always been about forging relationships, off the island with the provincial government, the national government, with universities. It's always been an outside, inside viewpoint. And I think that is quite critical for the island going forward. I loved it when she said, how we walk upright, we need outsiders, we need insiders. It just confirmed that's the only way we're going to get that pool of, that visionary thinking at this point. I also loved it that you intentionally have all these balls in the air about what we've discussed. The same conversations we've had about, seaweed and fishing quotas. You have to, or the freezer or things like that. You have to have them on the air till they can land. And that's a good thing. And I guess underlying that was the sort of 100-year vision.
Yes. Yes, I like that as well. And once again, because this is our 5th conversation, it comes down with a local who has the vision, who is unafraid to engage in dialogue and communication.
But it was a local coming back.
It was a local coming back.
Yes.
Diaspora was definitely a part of the conversation with Aotearoa Island last week, actually. Gosh, I got so much out of that. Would be interesting to investigate further their place-based economy project as well, and possibly even be part of that network of conversation, of learning. There was so much there. I'm looking forward to unpacking that more, actually, after a couple of days of just digesting.
When there's a lot of similarities in the way that they're running their artist in residence program as to mine, in that they do see the island as obviously restorative. There's no huge demands put on that person to produce. I love all that, but clearly funded extremely well, because if they're doing for a year and they're bringing artists with flights from Japan, Europe, that's very well funded to do that.
I loved generally, and we go back to the start of the conversation, I was interested in such an unusual and creative concept of using art to kickstart an economy. Integrity of the Fogo Island Inn, that actually they are using not just local people, right, but they're using local artisans, which is kickstarting the art and the maker community on the island as well. That those little ideas are so powerful.
Do you hearing her talk about the inn, do you think there is, it's obviously in Crown land, do you think there would ever be scope to do something like that on our island?
I can't imagine everybody wanting that, right?
No.
Our island. And we're actually not as disconnected as those 10 communities she was talking about.
No.
Geographically isolated, and we're not that. We are actually more connected, which is opportunities. I can imagine that a much smaller version of that. There's a real opportunity for a much smaller version of that, possibly using a couple of the inns that are already up for sale as well. But it takes somebody with real vision as well to relaunch that concept. Yes, well, lots to talk about. Thank you for being my wingman on this one.
Interesting.
Small Island Big Ideas wish to thank our sponsor, Island Gin, probably the world's most sustainable gin company, distilled with Manuka bush honey and bottled in recycled glass, right here off-grid on Aotea Great Barrier Island.
And thanks to our partner in crime, Bree Biederman, researcher Emma Ricketts, Aotea FM, Luke Nola and friends, and the local board of Aotea Great Barrier Island's Auckland Council, and the Festival of Adult Learning.
Is there anybody else we need to thank?
Oh, probably half the island, Sandy, but...
and Georgie, let's give a shout out
my
to
daughter Georgie.
Yeah.
The crew at Aotea FM, Linda Rowe and Rene Freeland.
Oh, and everybody from the island who's given us the great ideas too.
Yeah, that's right. They keep coming, don't they?
Absolutely.